Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Today's guest has finished 31 Ironman competitions, including the World Championships. He has been selected by the Smart CEO magazine twice as one of the top CXOs in the Mid-Atlantic. He's the founder and CEO of several businesses, one including the Endurance Zone. Please welcome Todd Jennings. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.
It's awesome to have you on the show. So we love talking endurance. And my favorite question to ask my guests is, Todd, tell me how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly.
Wow, that's a loaded question. Wow.
Yes.
Endurance sports has completely changed my life. I'm talking now sitting here in sunny Florida, moving here for both the kids are out of the house, empty nester, and want to be in a place where I can train more and be outside more. But if you wind the clock back probably about 13 years ago now, I was not in endurance sports. I was, slightly overweight, probably not doing much of activity, just focused on my career, right? I mean, it was just super busy. I'm in the technology field and spent most of my time just focused on that. And just happened to be flipping channels, watching TV, and came across on the NBC Sports, the Ironman World Championship. No idea what it was, didn't know what really a triathlon was. And just sat in kind of amazement, and they had, this is a rebroadcast, they had a story of a gentleman named John Blaze, who was the first and only person with ALS to complete the Ironman. And I sat there at the time, I was 42, and just was blown away by what he was accomplishing, that anybody could accomplish that at the time, right? Let alone with the, what he was facing and perseverance and just his dedication. Kind of looked at myself and my career thinking, what was my legacy? Like, this gentleman was just, it was amazing. And I just wanted, what was that? What was that thing? I wanted to be part of that thing where that I'd been driven in my career, but I'd never seen what he had completed, and had me really reflect what was really important. Was it climbing the corporate ladder? Was it the material things we see in life? And I really quickly realized that I had all those things, but it didn't define happiness. It didn't define purpose. It didn't define that goal that I think I was always looking for, but didn't really know what it was. And it was that day, it was sort of, John spoke to me, in this sort of strange way. So I woke up the next morning and I, was inspired, and I got on the treadmill and I ran about 2 miles and was winded, and did this a couple of days in a row. My wife was like, "What are you doing? What is this new thing?" I said, "I'm going to do an Ironman." And she laughed, chuckled, and anybody who knows me, don't tell me I can't do something. And, so that was the pivot point in my life that changed everything. My mindset, my dreams, my career, my business. As mentioned, I'd been in and have been in technology my entire career, built a few technology companies. But this journey of endurance started from off the couch and slowly worked my way up over the winter, doing a little bit of training. Never swam a lap in my life in a pool, ever. A traditional lap, as swimmers would know, swim in the pool. And did my first Olympic distance triathlon in Chicago, which is a fantastic venue, great event. Had no clue what I was getting into. As we came down to the first buoy and I heard a gun go off, the group behind us, and they swam right over top. I was doing every other stroke, but the proper stroke, freestyle, and barely made it to the swim finish. Got done. Once I was out of the water, I felt safe. Completed that. I said, okay, I got to get swim lessons. And I was just hooked. At that point, I knew, this big, hairy, audacious goal, right, of an Ironman just seemed so impossible. It just seemed like, bigger than Mount Everest, but it was that target I had to accomplish. And over that period of time, it just changes. I think the habits and behaviors you pick up from endurance sports, not just the mental fortitude and drive, but the consistency, the planning, the being prepared for the unexpected, right? Because it's going to happen. You can't go into an endurance event, whether it's a triathlon, a marathon, a mountain bike race, and expect everything to be the weather to be perfect and everything's going to go right, right? Well, it's just like business. Business is never going to go as you expect it to go. The deal's never going to close when you think it is. And you also have to be patient to realize you've got to put in the time and energy that businesses aren't built overnight. They take time and dedication and a foundation, which is the same as endurance sports, right? You've got to build up that base level of endurance where when I tell people today my typical daily training, they look at me like, how do you do that? Well, it's through years of building your body up where I do it and I don't think about it. My body's conditioned. But when I started, I could barely do 2 miles. An average day now, I run 10, 13 miles a day. No big deal because your body's conditioned. So it's the same as business, right? You have to slowly build up and prepare yourself for what's going to happen. So again, long-winded answer, but it really transformed everything in terms of, I shifted my career from technology, leveraging that experience. And the dream was always, how do I combine endurance, sports, and technologies? And that's where Endurance Zone was born 3 years ago.
Before we jump into Endurance Zone, I would love to know, one, what length of time was between the Olympic and your first Ironman? And then after you answer that, how did your business change sort of unexpectedly as you started taking on this Ironman endeavor?
Great question. It was literally, I did my first triathlon the following spring. I did my first half and my first full the same year. So within less than a calendar year. And then since then, it's been pretty much 1 to 2 a year, if not more. I mean, there's been seasons where I've done 3. That's on top of, I was traditionally racing every other week. So I was probably doing anywhere from 15 to 20 triathlons a season. So, I mean, the last 10 years, I've done well over 100 triathlons. I prefer the longer distance. I like the challenge more. So, that is, my preference. But, I think after, going into an Ironman, you've been there, right? It is the most terrifying thing the first time is no matter how much work, effort you put in. I'm a wired A+ type personality, right? When I know I've got something like that, my training was far exceeded probably the level of effort I needed to, but I didn't want to fail. I was so afraid of failing. Not getting to the finish line was my biggest fear. And I think in doing that, it started to shift a lot of the business mindset because I think I became a lot more structured in my day and my planning than I was before, right? As an entrepreneur, you're constantly a little bit of the squirrel moments. You're chasing things. You kind of get up and you're juggling 5 different balls, right? So I got a lot better at my time management in my day because I'm also now trying to put in the training that I want around trying to do all these other things in family, right? So you get a lot less sleep. You work a lot more, but it's really that mindset of how do you maximize the time that you do have, right? So you get a lot of times as an entrepreneur and other people want to collaborate. There were a lot of times where I'd love to say yes, and I had to start saying no. My time is my most valuable asset. I'm going to do these things and get to my goal, both in endurance sports and in business. I've got to manage my time and choose thoughtfully and with purpose the things that I'm going to do. So really help with my time management and that prioritization. And I think the goal building too, right? Because I've always been a big believer that small achievable goals so you can start to get that success and have your true north, as I would call it, that where are you going towards? Because you're going to bob and weave as you go. It's never a direct line, right? There's always going to be some pivots, whether it's business or in sports that you have to deal with. But if you continue to head towards that goal and track your progress, obviously being a technologist, I'm big on the data, the training, and big on data in business. It tells you a kind of a cadence, how, where is your business at? What is working? What's just like we do on the endurance side, right? We're watching, what are we doing? What's working and what's not?
Digging into the time management aspect, because you're spot on, right? I find when I am at the height of my training is when I am the most efficient with my business and when I'm the most attentive with my family. Do you have any some biohacks, or what's your time management best practice, or how do you manage your time in order to get all those things accomplished?
I think most endurance athletes can appreciate this. Non-endurance athletes look at us all, I think usually like we're a little bit crazy, a few screws loose. But, when I was really driving for those early days, because the goal was to get to Kona, right? I mean, every triathlete, that's the holy grail, right? But for me, the purpose was, and when I talk about John, I still get emotional. The purpose was to take the story back to Kona, where it all started, right? And I just thought how serendipitous it would be in full circle. And this is what happened in 2012 when I qualified, got to the world championship. I came across the finish line where John got to the finish line. And if you watch the 2005 Ironman, where they've got the story in the interview with John, they talk about, he said in the interview, he's like, I'll finish this race if they have to roll me across the finish line. So when he got to the finish line on the coverage, he got down and and he rolled in what they call now the Blaze Man roll. And so, it was just so amazing. I said, how incredible it'd be if I go to Kona and roll across the same finish line where John inspired me. That's the power one person can have. And now what I've done through the business and my platform for ALS and awareness and everything else, it just is, it really changed everything, right? And how that all took place. But so part of that is getting up early, right? Because you're training hard, you get very little sleep, right? Get up at 3:30 in the gym by 4:30 in the morning. You get your first session in, you work a good 8-10 hours, then you go back to the gym for another couple hours. But I tell people I don't need a lot of sleep, because when you're that tired, you've been training, working that hard. When I go to bed, I'm out, like deep REM sleep, and I only need a few hours and I feel okay. But you have to listen to your body. So that, for me, the hacks are really, as a technologist, there's this process in software development called, agile, and it uses the concept of a Kanban board. And so you sort of have these categories, a to-do list, right? Things you're working on and then where they're at. And so, and in that backlog, we call it the to-do list. You have your highest priority and most important things at the top and work your way down. And every day I get up, that's the first thing I do is I look at my list, try not to get distracted by email. I look at those priorities and I start to work on the very first one, get it done, go to the next one, get it done. Instead of trying to look at all the 12 other things I have to do, I am not to that step yet. Again, the small goals, take one at a time, and I think when you get the first one or two goals accomplished, you get that sense of accomplishment. It kind of starts to empower you versus waking up, checking the email, figuring out you got to respond to 12 different people. I got to do this right now. You've got all these things floating in your head of what you got to do versus it's almost a quiet meditation. All right, what's my day look like? What time do I have? What's my training look like? What's the family time? Now let me start working on the task and turn the email off. Like I have found closing your Outlook, because you get all the little pop-ups and what happens, you're working on something, you get that little distraction. Oh, there's an email from finance. Let me go see what it is. Turn it off. What do we do before? We live in a world where the expectation is you send an email, you expect a response in 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's not realistic. So checking your email at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, something along that or what works, but closing that distraction keeps a more focused mindset, right? Just like race day, hyper focused. What do you got to do? One discipline at a time. It worked well for me.
That's really helpful insight. And you're spot on with blocking time for email and blocking time for no email, because it is just one after the other. I'm curious, Todd, do you prepare that list that you review in the morning the night before? Are you doing anything the night before to sort of prepare yourself for the following morning?
Typically, the only thing night before is obviously seeing if I have anything early in terms of meetings or calls that I have to get prepared for. But typically not, because that to-do list is being managed throughout the day. So if something comes up in my inbox, I try to keep my inbox clean. Clean inbox is also another distraction. Everyone, I see people have got 3,000 emails in there. I look at it, and if there's an action item I have to do, add it to the to-do list, and then I file the email away. Done. It's out of sight, out of mind. It's not in my inbox. It's already on the list based on that prioritization of, is that important? Can it wait? And if it's something that says, oh, it's not till next month, I'll put a date on it. Now it's farther down the list, but it's got a due date. So I'll work my way through the list as I get there. But again, it's less distractions. With all the technology, as wonderful it is, we've got too much coming at us. And I think it's just hard to focus on all of it. And so check the schedule the night before, mentally get your game, just like race day, right? You're mentally thinking about the next day and what's going to happen, visualization. Same thing on the business side. What meetings do I have? Anything I need to prep for? I'm prepared. I don't have to be putting something together 20 minutes before. Be prepared. You never want to rush, just like you don't want to get the transition on race day late. I've done it. It's a nightmare.
Yeah. The extra 15 minutes of sleep before going to race site isn't worth the anxiety.
You're not sleeping anyway.
That's right. Todd, I would love to hear the perspective of your friends and family when you took on this endeavor. Like, you got inspired by Blazeman roll. You watch it on TV. The next day you go out and you do your 2-mile run. The next thing you're doing a little bit more. And then you're doing an Olympic. And I mean, your friends and family must have been asking some pretty intense questions. I'd love to hear that side of the story. Like, how have they embraced it? How have they looked at you funny? How have they said, what are you doing, man? Give us that side of the story.
Yeah, there's a few perspectives there. I think my wife has kind of gone the full life cycle. I think, she was pretty engaged. She got drug along with the kids when they were younger, waking up at 3:30 in the morning to get packed up and go to transition and then stand around for 14, 15 hours waiting for you, right? Incredibly patient, incredibly supportive. Definitely, it takes a village, right? And they were always there, as I got through, checking off 9, 10, 11 Ironmans. As I started, my wife's like, I've seen enough. I don't need to go anymore. I'm sleeping in, so while she's supportive, I'm more solo now going to those races and other athletes and friends. The kids are off and out of the house. So, but they've been incredibly supportive, especially, it was prospect like Kona was my son's 18th birthday. And for the kids to see the journey, what I wanted them to take away and anyone else was anything's possible. You heard the tagline, the tagline, but it is so true, and I tried to show them at that point in their life when they're kind of deciding what do they want to do, what do they want to be, that you can be whatever you want, but it takes hard work. It takes dedication. It takes that level of effort, but you have to dream big. And I think that's one thing I've always taken away from, and I've learned, and I have a military background, but the part that endurance sports has expanded was our mind is our biggest limit. And I think kids, I wanted them and to understand my family members and others, as my mom transitions into retirement, other things you can do, right? Don't be held to something because you don't think you can do it. And so I think this journey's they've been incredibly supportive. They definitely look at me a little crazy, especially now as I'm transitioning from my iron challenges, going into the long distance ultra running, 100-mile, 200-mile runs. They're even think I'm more crazy than I was before. So, but they get it. They know it's how I'm wired and they support me fully.
So let's dig into that. I'd love to understand, because my long distance is Ironman, and I daydream very rarely about going any further. But of course, that carrot is out there. Educate me on that transition. How is the mindset different? How is the training different? What pushed you over the edge to do it?
I love triathlon. I mean, people say, hey, have you ever done a marathon? I say, nope. I've done 31 Ironmans, 31 26-mile runs, but I've never done a marathon. I guess as a triathlete, as we would say, I don't see it as challenging, just to go out and do a marathon. And I love being a triathlete, and I always will identify as a triathlete. It's who I am. And I don't disrespect the distance, but for me, getting there race day, now I sleep race night. I'm not stressed. I'm not worried. I honestly go into race day looking at it as It's a day with 2,500 other like-minded friends of mine. We're going to go have a great long day training session. We're all going to suffer a little bit. That's all it is a training session. So I'm not worried about getting to the finish line. I'm not worried about those issues. And I try to actually take more of the race in and enjoy it. I do now way more than I ever did in the beginning because I was so focused. I missed all the things that are happening around, all the other athletes. But that challenge, that burn, fire in my belly was just not the same as it was when I was trying to do my first Iron, almost terrified. And a good friend of mine, a training partner, she's an ex-pro triathlete, Susie Serpico. She's, an endurance goddess. She's done, multiple ultra Ironmans, double Ironmans. She did she's like third and only, I think the third female to only complete the Epic 5, which is 5 Ironmans on the 5 Hawaiian Islands in 5 days. She's incredible. And she kind of inspired me to start looking at this ultra running. And the funny part is running is my weakest, worst leg of the Ironman. I'm a cyclist. And it forced me to start training and looking at my running, the technical side, my running technique, and watching a lot of like the Western States 100 and the Cocodona 250 or a lot of these other races. We as athletes spend so much time on the treadmill and indoor, the trainer. I'm always looking for new content to watch while I'm training. And I just started watching more of this endurance running. Like, that looks super hard. Western States, up and down the mountain, running for 24 hours or sometimes multiple days in the Cocodona, thinking that is so much more of a mental push than even an Ironman is. To try it. I want to see what my limit is. So that's the next stage. I've done a couple ultras, I've done a couple 32-mile runs and trail runs and 50 milers, but next season it's the 100, and then we'll see about the 250.
That's fantastic. I'll make sure to stay away from those YouTube videos when I'm on my bike this afternoon. Shifting gears, Todd, talk to us about the Endurance Zone and what that business is, what it does, and then I'd love to get into your ALS platform. So talk to us about the Endurance Zone.
Sure. So, Endurance Zone has been, as any entrepreneur knows, it's been a journey, and we've had a couple pivots along the way. But I came together with myself and 2 other co-founders who are both based in the UK, in London, which is where our business is based out of. And we're a B2B platform. So it's all about, as an athlete, one of the first challenges I always had was looking at, when looking at trying to solve a problem with athletes, we spend a ton of money, doesn't matter which of the endurance sports, pick any one of them, on gear, nutrition, products, new shoes, new bikes, helmets, all these things, right? And they're not inexpensive sports. What can we do? No one's solving the problem. Like, how do we help these athletes save money? So took my technology background and our relationships with brands and Endurance Zone. We're a B2B model where we focus on member engagement, trying to get people healthy and fit by offering discounts and rewards on sports brands. So we work directly with about 450 of the largest sports brands in the world. So everybody from your Nikes to your Under Armours to your Garments and anyone else in between, clothing to nutrition to apparel and gear. And we work with customers we work with USA Cycling, we work with British Cycling, with British Triathlon. They have a member base, and all those members, athletes, or whether they're a gym goer, are buying these new shoes. They're buying, nutrition products. They're buying electrolyte drinks. And through our platform, we're giving them anywhere from 20 to up to 60% off of these products. They don't have to wait for a Black Friday sale. They don't have to wait for some special offer. If they're a member of, say, USA Cycling, they go on the platform, go, oh, you know what? I need some new trainers, right? I need a new helmet for go for a ride. They can go online, they'll log into their USA Cycling portal, grab a discount, and go shopping for a new helmet. So it's a way for our business partners to keep their members engaged, offer great incentives. And our goal is to hopefully get people out there, be more active, healthy, and fit, where we've shifted now to incorporating smartwatches technology, where now we'll reward people for being active by giving them competitions where they can win products in gears, no virtual badges. We're all about get them a pair of shoes, get them a Fabletics outfit, get them a Garmin watch. So if you're moving, you're earning points, and then you can redeem those points in these platforms to get actual gear, product, nutrition. We're even looking at like special events. Can we get somebody a 1 week to the Tour de France or Ironman or things like that? So it's things that kind of gamify getting people active. So if it's Susie Homemaker and she's just walking a couple miles a day or doing something, we hope to encourage and open up that opportunity, that door to be introduced to fit, health, wellness, because I think it brings that mental side as well, right? Mental focus. You end up becoming a better parent, a better spouse, a better worker, a better leader. It all kind of flows back into the business side if you're taking care of yourself and you're mentally healthy and physically healthy.
That's amazing. And as an entrepreneur, you've got my head spinning a little bit. You also mentioned earlier the platform that you started or created around ALS. Can you talk to us about that?
So, again, as John inspired me, that was always my purpose. John had spoke to me that day when I watched what he had accomplished. John did this in 2005. He went back to Kona in a wheelchair in 2006, and unfortunately we lost him in 2007. And part of that story, as I left out, was I was inspired. That night, I got online, I did a little research. I found John's parents, Bob and Marianne. I reached out and wrote them a long letter and just said how John inspired me. Didn't know their son, was really sorry for the loss. I didn't know much, and if anything, ALS, didn't know anybody that had ALS, no family members. But I wanted to make sure his legacy wasn't for the journey. I want to help. What can I do? And John Blaze was his name, is, kind of started Blaze Man. Everyone called him Blaze Man. And so they started the Blaze Man Warriors, and part of that's always been about raising the awareness for ALS. And I learned more about this god awful disease that unfortunately there's still no cure. And it's one of those diseases, prior to the Ice Bucket Challenge, no one knew much about, right? Because people didn't like to talk about it. It was one of those, and I hate to say it, there's a lot of awful diseases that we deal with, right? Mm-hmm. But if your doctor diagnoses you with cancer, you at least have hope, right? We've got treatment. There's curing it. They're getting so much better. When a patient's diagnosed with ALS, it's usually very rapid, very quick, and they pretty much tell you, go home, spend time with your family, get your house in order, get your life in order. And a lot of it is, anywhere from a couple months to maybe 6-9 months. There are those fringe cases because they're still learning about ALS. And my other gentleman, OJ Brigance, is Baltimore Ravens player. I was on OJ's Brigance Brigade board for a number of years. There's another, I'm a big supporter of OJ and again, his foundation and along with the Blaze Man. So it's always been, as I do every Iron, I roll across the finish line. I've got lots of pictures online. I was on the NBC coverage coming down as they were doing, I was coming down the finishing chute with a big war on ALS there. So that was on NBC Sports, and that's it, right? Exposure, get that awareness. So I always try to raise money and awareness for ALS, Blaze Man Foundation, Brigance Brigade, anyone that kind of needs help, and take that opportunity to educate people about that aren't familiar with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, what they could do to help. And post Ice Bucket Challenge, fortunately and unfortunately, we're seeing more social media, professional athletes, individuals, actors who've gotten the disease. So it's getting that recognition, and they are making great progress with a lot of the research that's being done, but we're still years away from a cure. And I said to John and John's parents, which, I've got John's, I got my Ironman tattoo and I've got John's name on it. So I carry him with me every day in my heart, on my body. But I said that I committed to racing until as long as I can, so my body will hold out, or until we hear I'm an ALS survivor.
Well, thank you for doing that, leading that charge and really being an inspiration. And even going back so far when you were inspired and then carrying that forward. So I appreciate that, Todd. I'm going to change topics on you a little bit. We know about your Ironman history. We know a little bit about your business entrepreneurship. Tell us about the rest of your life. Like, let us know more about Todd.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the East Coast of the United States in Maryland. I got 2 kids, and most of my career, as I mentioned, have been in technology. I spent half of it in corporate IT and various CIO, CTO roles in healthcare, publicly traded. The second half of my career, probably the last 15, 20 years has been more entrepreneurial. Built and sold a couple of tech companies, smaller kind of software development, managed service provider type of companies. But, endurance, once we got this dream off the ground, has always been the passion, right? Because it's the two things I love the most. It's being around athletes, helping people get exposed to these sports and these races and how it can change their mind, along with using the technology to build our platform. I've been married coming up on 30 years now. My son is just turning 30, which is hard to believe. My kids at Penn State, so we're big Penn State. We just spent the last couple of months up in very disappointed at the end of the season, making it to the Final Four. But, it's a great time. It's a great experience. With the kids out of the house, as I mentioned, we are now sitting here in Central Florida. I sold the house, kind of downsized, no longer needed. It was all about trying to be somewhere warmer where I could swim, bike, and run a lot more outside year round, and looking for our next venture down here and see what else life will throw at us, right? And kind of make our way into the other endurance sports of running, and who knows what we might get into. I think it's trying to make the most of every day and taking any of it for granted, right? And just continue to have fun and put family first and everything else. But kind of me in a nutshell. I did leave out. It all kind of started. I do owe a lot of credit. Feel like some of my rigor and discipline did come from the military. It was in the U.S. Navy. After graduating school at the University of Florida, I joined the Navy and was fortunate. I worked for a 4-star admiral, Admiral Baggett, who was the Supreme Allied Commander for the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. And just, I think it set a solid foundation for me in terms of discipline, rigor, attention to detail, all the things you kind of take away, the camaraderie, that's key that you kind of take into business, right? In terms of your staff, your coworkers, your co-founders, that part of it is important to me. And even though a lot of these endurance sports are individual, sort of looked at as individual sports, they're not really. They're team sports because you got a team of people behind you supporting your family, supporting you, your kids supporting you, making the sacrifices, the schedules, which people you're dealing with, whether it's coaches or massage therapists. You don't get to that race or to that level with a bunch of people helping you get there. I think the one thing I love about triathlon, and you think about business and community, is the camaraderie. When you go to any of these events that I've been to, everyone's not competing against you. They're competing against themselves. And I think that's really great because you go there, and I was so nervous that first day. Everyone around me was so helpful. All those newbie things I didn't really know, how to rack the bike or how to do this. It's intimidating. So I try to pay that forward now and offer and put on camps and do things for people that want to get into sports. And you don't want them to be intimidated, right? You want them to feel embraced and know it's a community. Just like your business is your team, you want your employees to feel safe. You want your staff to feel comfortable, that they can come and they're not expected to know everything. That's why they're there, but you're going to help mentor and teach them. And failure isn't looked at as a negative. Failure is, that's incredible. That's great. You attempted it. Now let's figure out what we do, and you'll keep getting better, and eventually you will achieve that. So in business, it's never about, you want your employees to think, hey, I tried, I figured this out. Great. I want you to try for a certain amount of time, but then raise your hand. I'm stuck. There's nothing wrong with being stuck, just like an endurance race. There's nothing wrong with failing. We all get better at failure, just like entrepreneurs. I've had several failures. I've had some ideas that just didn't work out. You're not going to hit on every time, no matter how hard you work at it. So it's not always the level of effort, just like in training, right? You can easily overtrain. It's not about quantity. It's also about quality.
Yeah, failure is part of our learning process, both in entrepreneurship and also in our endurance training. So Todd, we've got audience members who are entrepreneurs. I would assume some of them are thinking about taking on an Ironman race. What advice would you give to that entrepreneur?
I think it's just just like we talked about earlier, like in business, I think, in the business, right, you often start with a plan, right? Write it all out on paper. I think it's good to map it all out, right? And again, kind of being that tech analytical guy, I'm all about the data and having a plan. And starting with small goals, whether that's depending on where that individual is in their journey, whether they're just looking to get fit, starting with like 5K or something small so that they can get their body and their mindset up to a certain point, right? You want to kind of do a 5K, then maybe a 10K. A lot of triathletes struggle with, and most are not swimmers, right? As we know, I love to swim now, but I was not a swimmer. That's a big mental goal to overcome. The YMCA is a great program. I went to get swimming in a master's program. They've got a lot of free programs where I had no clue how to properly breathe, and I learned. So I think it's that the big goal. If your goal is, I want to do an Ironman, set a realistic timeline. I think for somebody who's just starting, who may not be doing physical fitness activity, I'd say look at 18 months. I think that's realistic. For somebody who might be semi-fit and that's maybe running marathons or doing half marathon, I think a 12-month plan is something that's realistic if you stick to it, and it's consistency, right? Consistency and dedication to build that endurance. It is that. And there's, depending where they're at, having a coach might be the right idea, or a mentor, align with somebody who's on that, along that journey, who can, no pun intended, share with you where they've skinned their knees a few times, where they've made some mistakes, and all the things that I've learned, all the mistakes I've learned, so they don't have to make those mistakes. But develop the plan and then just follow the program, right? Every day, that's what you got to do this morning. If you keep doing the program, you will eventually get to the goal, and you'll be able to do an Ironman. I mean, we've done it. We knew at first it seemed like it was impossible. It's not. And it's definitely one of the most rewarding, gratifying, amazing. Only someone who's crossed that finish line knows the feeling. You just can't put it into words. And it is still, doesn't matter how many times you cross, it is the most rewarding feeling I've probably ever had in my life.
You're making my palms sweat just talking through it. So I'll ask you the reverse question. Does the advice change for an athlete who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur?
No, I mean, I think in today's world and technology, I mean, gosh, I wish a lot of the things are available today. When I was 25, I wonder where my life would be and what I might be doing differently. There's so much opportunity out there. It's both good and bad, because there's a lot of people chasing it, which is encouraging. I did a couple mentor groups in Baltimore of startup groups where there's a lot of great entrepreneurs who had a great idea, but clearly had no experience in the execution or operation. So I think as an entrepreneur, the biggest thing to do is, as they always say, surround yourself with smarter people, right? Get involved in a startup group, find a mentor. If you're going into home construction, or you're going into, bicycle shop, or whatever it is, find businesses in that area, or maybe a leader that you can get in touch with, and take them to lunch, offer to buy them lunch, pick their brain, understand how did they get started? What were the challenges? Like anything, it's just doing that research, right? So it's the prep work going into starting the business, or you pull the trigger, look at the market, look at the industry. What is it that you want to drive to do? What's going to differentiate you? And then what is the plan, right? Got to do this. I've got to open up shop, and setting realistic goals, right? You can't have this even happen. Clients who, I got an idea, I'm going to launch a website, and then they're disappointed because there's no business coming in. It's not the field of dreams. If you build it, they're not going to just come. That's part of that plan, right? As an entrepreneur, and just like we talked about earlier, as an athlete, set the plan. But as I say, the plan is always in pencil. You are going to pivot. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to adjust, and you're going to have to constantly look at the data. What is working? What not? Take feedback. Don't take it as criticism, and know that you're going to fail. Somebody, as I hate to say it, had to say this to a couple entrepreneurs. They don't want to hear their baby's ugly. Sometimes you're going to say, your baby's ugly. You got a great idea. I think if you spun it this way and did that, and it's some entrepreneurs won't let that go. And I think as an entrepreneur, that is one of the first things you've got to do. If you're on the path of failure, get out quick. Fail fast. Don't keep beating your head on a wall trying to get something that's not working because you think it's a great idea. Survey people in the industry. Right? Would you like this? Would you buy this? Would you use this? They're going to tell you, because if they don't want it, doesn't matter how great you think it is, nobody's buying it. You're not going to have a business.
That's great advice, Todd. And I wish I had that advice 10 years ago, but that's a whole other podcast. Todd, how could an
Me
audience
too.
member
Me too.
how could an audience member get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, or you can email me at tjennings@endurancezone.com. Our website's endurancezone.com. At this point in my career and with everything else I mentioned, just like with triathlon, endurance sport, and much like you're doing now, trying to give back and give to the community. If there's something I can help with, if I can make an introduction, if I can point somebody in the right direction. People did it for me my entire career, and I feel I'm at that point of it's time to pay it forward and give it. I'm more than happy to. Just email me. If I don't get back to you right away, you're in my inbox. I can guarantee you'll get a response. It might just take a day or two.
You're in a specific folder, as we learned about from your time management discussion. Todd, it's been great. And those links we'll include in our show notes. So anyone who didn't capture that while listening, just scroll down and you'll find it. Todd, it's been great having you on the show. I really enjoyed all of our conversations. Some highlights that jumped off the page for me was when you mentioned that our mind is our biggest limitation, right? We talked about True North and your passion and how you got inspired by John Blaze. That story is amazing, and it's just got my skin tingling again. And then I really got a lot of value out of the time management discussion and how our endurance mindset and our willingness to do these races and the training really makes us collapse time to a point that you focus on what's important and everything else just kind of fades away. My message to the audience, if you've got some value out of today's show, please like the show. Please subscribe to the podcast. Todd's message and his story are really important. And the more that we can share it within our community, the more impact we can have. Again, Todd, it's been awesome having you on the show. I'm looking forward to watching your results from your upcoming ultra racing. Thank you again.
Thanks, Greg. And one last tidbit. I'd say go to YouTube, Google John Blaze, Blais. And if you aren't inspired watching the 2005 clip on YouTube of John Blaze, I'll be pretty impressed if you're not. He was an amazing man. So thanks for having me, Greg. And I really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.